Just another couple of minutes and we'll get going. I've heard from a couple of people who couldn't come, but I suspect we'll see more shortly here. Tell where that who's who we're overhearing. Okay, good to see you all. I'm going to get going right away because, an hour and 15 minutes isn't that long. But welcome. Thank you for being this prompt. We may have a few others joining us. I mentioned a couple have told me that they couldn't join us. I'm still, Hannah, is that you on the iPhone? I'm still just trying to know who's here. All right, if I see you signed in, I'm expecting you to answer. I think that's fair enough. Uh, but give me just a second. Okay, let's see. All right, here's what we're going to be doing today. Give me just almost there. All right, so I want us to, I got to read all of your homework. I'm caught up on reading your homework now. And I want to just revisit the writing process just a little bit by talking about a couple of ideas from Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Writers and Shitty First Drafts. And then if there's anyone here who hadn't introduced themselves, we're going to go ahead and do that. I apologize for having to delay it so long for everyone. But if there's anyone here who hasn't introduced themselves, I'll want you to do that today. Then we're going to look at our class calendar together. We're approaching spring break, and I want to give you an idea of the assignments that will be coming. And we'll go over your homework at that point too. And then last, we'll close the class out by reading a very short story called The Flowers by Alice Walker. And it's only a page and a paragraph. Is something we should be able to cover. And I've got a set of questions I hope we can answer together before the class is over. But that's what we'll finish up with that story. So with that, excuse me, let me turn my phone off. With that, let's get going. Many of you wrote very nicely about Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Writers and about shitty first drafts. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things from each one. But let me start out by asking, what would somebody tell us what you thought was just the most important lesson from Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Writers? Now, I know that was, most of you wrote about it 2 weeks ago, so you may need to gather your thoughts a minute. But what stuck with you? What was your takeaway for what was the most important lesson? And feel free to just, I can't see you, so start talking. If two people talk at once, just one of you can choose to let the other go.
It's that it's okay to write terribly because writing is difficult as hell.
Well, does she talk as much about it writing terribly?
Oh, I thought we were talking about the other thing. Okay, yeah, no. This one was about how writing is a very difficult process. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. She mainly wants to let us know that for the best writers, it's a struggle and it often feels futile and difficult. That's one of the things that's one of the big takeaways. Why is that relevant to us in a class like this?
Because we're going to be doing a lot of writing.
You'll be doing a lot of writing. Will it always be easy to do?
No, it's never easy.
It's probably never going to be, right? So equally, what was one of the main messages from Shitty First Draft? Thank you, Tyler. Let's hear from someone else. What's one of the main message? What's the big takeaway from Shitty First Draft? Several of you answered that very well, so just give it a shot. Monty, can you give us an idea about that?
I'm not really sure. My take was kind of like all jobs are kind of like, I guess, shitty, but like it's kind of the norm.
Well, here's the important thing. Why is it okay to have a terrible first draft? What does it do for you to say it's okay if you have a terrible first draft?
Well, first drafts are kind of just like, well, they're not good. And it's just kind of for you to get out basically like what you know you want to say, what you're trying to do before like you polish it and make it look nice and pretty.
That's the idea, okay? I mean, and here's the thing. A lot of times because writing's difficult, the very hardest thing is just getting started, right? I mean, I think we've all had experiences where we just stared at a blank page or wrote something and just thought it was horrible and couldn't keep going. But one of the biggest things is to get going. And she's trying to give you permission for that and help you see that it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And where you start, you just need to let yourself go. So I'm going to highlight a couple of other quotes. This is one that several of you highlighted in Rachel Torr's piece. If you want to craft something that people will want to read, you're going to have to work hard and in ways that put calluses on your brain. You have to get used to the feeling of stuckness. You have to show up and do the work, even when it feels stupid and meaningless. Now, I was glad this stood out to you. There are a number of things here. Writing puts new calluses. That's another way. People sometimes say you have to develop new muscles. I think Ta-Nehisi Coates actually said that. But when you're learning new things, it's like developing new muscles. And calluses means you've exercised them until they're hard spots. Uh, but the feeling of stuckness, just dealing with that discomfort, that you're not always in a comfortable place when you write. Ideally, you will be by the time you're done. But she says you have to show up and do the work, even if it doesn't feel right, even if it feels stupid and meaningless. That's a pretty strong statement there. She made one other that was connected to it, a couple of you picked up on. And Ismahan, do you mind reading this for us? I can't, I'm not seeing who's.
I can read.
Thank you, Ismahan. Go ahead.
Okay. Though, let's be honest, no matter how awful it feels, it's far from the pain of a real illness or not being able to afford to get your car fixed or having to teach 5 classes a semester at 3 different campuses. Yeah, writing is hard, but if it's what you get to do for your job, it's also a luxury.
Okay. So let's just let this sink in a minute. A couple of you said this very well, that she points to how even just being able to write, trying to learn about writing is a privilege, and that we're fortunate to be doing that. She's putting the emphasis that if your job involves writing, it's a luxury. But the important thing she's saying, you might think writing's painful, but it's not as painful as a lot of real problems in life, okay? Like an illness, or just not having enough money, or having to struggle with your work in one way or another. And I think the parallel for us is trying to think about how being in this class and learn and having the opportunity to work on writing really is a luxury. This is the luxury is that you're getting a chance to refine this skill, improve this skill. The more you write, it helps you think more clearly, it helps you express yourself. And so there is a kind of privilege in that. And I think it's good of her to highlight that way. I'm going to close this little bit with this one last quote from Shitty First Drafts. And so could we hear from someone we hadn't heard from who could read this for us?
I could read it.
Thank you, Abdi.
Almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting something, anything, down on paper. A friend of mine says that the first draft is the down draft. You just get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You fix it up. You try to say what you have to say more accurately. And the third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth to see if it's loose or cramped or decayed or even, God help us, healthy.
Thank you. So this is Anne Lamott's last paragraph. And it's just a good summary of pulling it all together there, okay? And again, she's highlighting, you begin with terrible first effort. Excuse me, I I thought I could highlight it, but I'll just run my cursor over it. It begins with terrible first efforts. You don't need, that's not the important thing is where you start, but you do get started and you get things down and then you can go from there to make them better. So this is what I really want you to be sure you understand about her essay. It's not just that it's okay to write a terrible draft, though she's saying that has much more value than you might realize. What's important is that you keep working and that you use the writing process to take what you start with, make it a little bit better, take that little bit better and make it better yet. I think Monty said earlier, the polish that comes. But you don't start polish, you finish polish, and you don't do it necessarily. You don't do all that in one sitting. And the coming back and rethinking is what make things good. So I'm gonna stop there, and we have a little bit of a trick here. Can I hear from anyone? Let's see, maybe I should stop for a second. Can I hear from anyone who has not introduced themselves yet? Who's here that hasn't introduced themselves to the class?
Me.
Monty, good. Who else? Adelaide, I don't believe you have you?
Me, Professor.
Excuse me?
I didn't explain myself.
You haven't yet, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, that's two. Any others? Christoph?
It's my first class here, so me too.
Amin. Okay, thank you. Christoph, how about you? Christoph, are you here? This doesn't do to, if you put your if you put your name up, you should be able to answer a question. All right. And Hannah, is this you on the iPhone again?
Yes, before I was with the baby, letting him sleep. That's why when you call my name, sorry, I didn't speak.
Okay, I just want to be sure you're there. All right.
Yeah, sorry
So
about that.
We have it at three people. If nobody else is going to speak up, we've got Adelaide, Amin, and Mani. Okay, so let me go back to show you how we're going to introduce. I'm going to put some slides back up. So what we said we would do, all right, here's what you're going to do. And I'm going to leave this up in a minute so you can look at it as you go, but take a minute to think about this. We mainly want to hear your first name. What are your pronouns, as people say today, just so you can stress your own gender identification. Your hometown, where, your place of origin, and if it's important to you, what's your high school? Some of you may be further away from that, it may not matter. And does your name have a particular significance? What name are you known by to your friends and family? What name do you want to be known by in class? So this is mostly about just your name. And then we said we would give one moment, one statement about what's been a source of comfort or a moment of comfort that helps you cope with the pandemic, okay? And while you're thinking about that, and again, I'm gonna put it back up while you're speaking. I had said, when I did this, I'm not gonna repeat all this, but just so you'll know, this was, I went through my whole name, where I had grown up, the ethnic origin of my name, how it had been cut down, what the K and J stood for, and how I'm known to friends and family, and what I want to be known by in class. And my source of comfort was reading novels aloud with a friend. We did that for, weeks and weeks, and that was a big help, reading outside together. So here's the list. And who wants to go first out of those three?
I can go first.
Thank you, Monty.
So my name is Amani. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My original hometown is Dorchester, Boston, but now I live in Hyde Park, Boston, and I graduated from Newton North High School. The origin of my name, I was originally supposed to be named Autumn, but I'm kind of technically named after my dad, but not really, because his name is Ahmad, Ahmad, and my name is Amani, Ahmani. So Ahmad and Amani kind of named after each other. My family and friends' nickname is Mani. You guys can call me Mani. How the pandemic affected me is I'm naturally an introvert, so it hasn't really affected me in a negative way because, I like to be in my house. I like to be in my own space. I like to spend time with myself. It's affected me in a positive way because I've actually learned so much more about myself, and like I've learned to love myself so much more and like enjoy being in my own company. And I've also just been like spending the quarantine with my boyfriend. So it's been like actually really fun and like a learning process about myself and like him and like my family and stuff. So the quarantine hasn't really affected me in a negative way. I mean, although I wish like obviously COVID wasn't around, but it's been more of a positive experience for me than a negative one.
Very good, Monty. No, that it's really, I've heard other people who call themselves introverts say similar things, and almost like it's going to be an adjustment once they can't stay home all the time,
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm glad that you've gotten a benefit from it all the same. That was a very
Yeah.
good. And I'm
Thank
sorry, I'm trying to I like for people to be able for you to see each other. But let's see. Who's going to go next?
Can I go next?
Yeah, go
Professor?
ahead, Adelaide.
My name is Adlet. My surname is Sattarov. I'm from Kyrgyzstan, and it's my first month in Boston.
Excellent.
And my family call me just AD, and also you are just saying me call me AD. And what else?
Has there been? Yeah.
In pandemic, I was at home. I'm a little bit introvert, and I just play, or that's it.
Okay, thank you, AD. AD, and thank you. Did you say Adelet? Is that the
Athlete means in athlete means like just a minute.
No, I was just trying to be sure I was pronouncing it correctly because I had said Adelaide. I thought it was like a long E. I was hearing it as an A, but you said Adelet, right?
Pronounce is Adilet.
Adilet. Is that close?
Yes.
Adilet.
It's hard to say you.
Yeah, well, AD is, I appreciate your simplifying. You saw that my name, my family name originally was Elefthered or Lycus, and it got cut down to Lycus to simplify for everyone. But thank you, AD. And did I cut you off? Did you say what you wanted to about the pandemic?
No, I
Any-
just was at home.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so you've just been here a month. Good for you. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Glad you've wound up in class. But AD, I think I've been trying to reach you. I do need to get a Gmail. You need to write me from a Gmail account. And it would probably be good if you and I set up a time to speak, because I feel like there's some things that you need to catch up on. Okay. So
I wrote you.
You did write me
Yes,
with the Gmail?
yes.
Okay.
We
I
are talking together.
have set that up. Let's get together though to speak online one-on-one. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Are we down to Amin?
Yes, sir. My name is Amin Ahmed Adam. I'm from Sudan originally. Was born in Saudi Arabia. Lived there for most of my life. Male, he, his. I don't remember anything made me feel comfortable throughout the pandemic, because I was between here and Sudan and Saudi Arabia. I didn't stay in one place for more than a month, so it wasn't a fun experience. I don't remember anything. That's it. Thank you.
Amin, does that mean it hasn't been difficult for you?
It has been difficult. So
It has
yeah,
It's nothing been a comfort. You're saying there hasn't been a real comfort.
yeah, because I had to move, and then airports got like locked down, so I had to stay in places more than I wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. No, I can appreciate that. All right. So thank you. And there's no one else here today who hasn't introduced themselves? Again, I'm sorry it took so long, but it's good for us to at least hear a little bit more and have a better sense of who's out there. So thank you for taking that time. All right. So now let's step back a second and think about where we are in the semester. What I want to alert you to is that spring break is coming up in about 3 weeks. It'll be the week of March 15th. And on that Friday, the 19th, we won't meet. So that means we just have 2 more classes after today before the break. Okay. So what I'm planning to do, I will have your personal narratives graded by next Friday. You will hear from me sometime this week as I grade the papers individually. I'm likely to, when I read your essay, to suggest that there's something you should revise in it, something to improve in it, is one of the things that I'm likely to do. And what I want, if I tell you that and you're going to revise it, I want you to make a copy of it so that the original stays in place and you start revising in a separate place. So we have the clear record of the before and after. I'll repeat that next Friday, but just realize if you start to revise before next Friday, you need to copy the essay and start revising in a new version. All right. So I'm planning next week to assign an essay that will be due on the 12th. So you'll write one more essay before you go on your break, and you'll have a revision assignment in all likelihood. And I'll give you guidance next week. It's a good, if it may be you can revise first, then do your essay. But it will be more important to do the new essay by the 12th. And so you may want to make that a priority going forward. So just that's a little bit of an overview and where we are right now. And let me just say that next essay is going to grow out of what we're going to be reading today and the reading you're going to be doing for homework next week.
Ask a question about the
Sure. Yeah, Abdi.
narrative essay.
Yeah.
Like in your experience, what does a really good grade for that essay? Like, what does the essay look like?
That's a good question, Abdi. For the essays we'll do later, I have a rubric. I don't have a rubric for the narrative essays, but you know, the typically what makes them good is just the quality of the storytelling. You know, does it tell a clear story? Are there good details that make it plain? Is it obvious that you've described well what the difficulty was, and you've described well what got you through it? And so that's generally, that may be a little bit vague, but is that a help?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's really, you know, like, and I can put it another way. Some of the ways that they don't work is if you just don't say enough, you know, you haven't explained really what happened, or you didn't say it, you didn't explain it in a way that made it clear why it was, there was no feeling behind it. But usually the better ones take up something significant, explain it well, and you have a good sense when you're done about why this was trouble, why this was a difficult time, and how important it was that it got resolved in some way. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Feel free to speak up. Thank you for doing that. So here's some homework. I've graded everything to date. One of the disappointing things, there were very few of you who had done all of your homework assignments. I mean, I'd gone through a lot of folders before I finally hit one where somebody had done every assignment that I'd given for homework. And so if you did only one or two, or you didn't do any, you just don't want to stay in that place. You really need to commit to keeping up with every homework assignment I give you. You have to realize that you know, like on one measure for the homework, I just want to see that you're doing it. But I also see it's very good when it's clear that you've done it well, like several of you did do it really well, or had very good answers, even if you didn't do all the assignments. But it's just important to keep up. Doing the homework helps prepare you for the written essays, for the longer essays. It's the same sort of thing where if you do it, it's going to help your grade. And if you don't, it's going to hurt your grade. And, you know, I'm not sure I've said this in this class, but my goal is to get all of you to do as well as possible. Okay. I want you to succeed. I want to help you to succeed, but I can't get you to succeed if you don't do any work. And so you have to step up and take responsibility for keeping up with your assignments. So that's unnecessary lecture to those of you who did that well. But to anyone who hadn't done everything, I'm mainly trying to be real clear. Please start doing all the assignments. So, and for the ones you haven't done, let me just add, I put in your folders too. If they weren't done by the time I checked them, it's too late. You should be keeping up going forward. You don't go back and complete those, but do keep up going forward. Now, just a word about your homework grading too, is sometimes I use plus check and minus, or plus check and NI, which means needs improvement. And, you know, I'm doing that because some ways homework, if I were grading your homework on hard copy, I would just be putting checks by good things and pluses and minuses for how you did. But grading it online, I tend to write a little bit more. But I'm downplaying grades as part of it. I want you to focus on learning more than the grade. But, you know, this is pretty easy to interpret. If you do a check, it's okay. It's all right. It's probably at least good. A plus means very good. And then I sometimes do plus plus or even 3. If I do a minus, it definitely means needs improvement, or it's the same thing as needs improvement. And I'd rather say needs improvement than this is a D or an F, because it's kind of too early to start talking about Ds and Fs. But if you haven't done it, that's a D or an F, you know, you need to think of it that way. But I will, you know, sometimes I'll say, this means that this would be like borderline. Some of it's okay, some of it's better. Some of it's okay, some of it's not so good. But then I give you written comments too, so I think it should be clear. This semester, as some of you saw in your homework, I actually did give letter grades. You might have found an A or a B, and there were a few A pluses where things were real good, or not a few, there were at least a couple. But But the point is, I didn't worry as much about a need to downplay it because I thought that you had done a really clear, good job, or you could take hearing it was C plus or whatever. But I do want you to focus on the learning more so than the grading. So now, any questions about the grading? I hope you've been able to follow it okay. Yeah, let me give you one example before I leave. You know, like your syllabus homework, most of you that did that did it just fine, but I just put it was a plus. It wasn't, that's not like that's a big deal to make on. It's just good that you did it. You did it very well. That's all you need to know about it. All right. Oh, and the other thing, one last thing, because I was slow to get to this, but you had done some of this homework much further back. But remember, the important things for you to do it is not exactly when I tell you whether you did it well. You need to be keeping up as you go. And one other thing about this, I had to spend a lot of time putting dates in your file names and cleaning up, you know, like you might have had an essay in your homework folder. I had to move it to homework. Please try to pay attention every time you name a document in your homework folder or your essay folder, put the date at the very first. That's the important, that just makes it simpler to identify what's most recent. And if it's study questions, they go in your homework folder. If it's an essay, it goes in the essay folder. And so I hope that that's getting clear to everybody by now, but I'm spending a little bit too much time just having to do cleanup as I go. All right, so let me tell you what your homework's going to be.
Professor Kenny,
Yes.
where do we find those grades, like on the assignment? Like, is it on the side? Like, you know what I mean? Like, where do we find what you graded us?
Thank you, Ismahan. In your folder, I've created, like in your essay folder, I've created a document that says essay feedback. In your homework folder, I've created a document that says homework feedback. And I put in there my feedback each time. Sometimes I put in your homework, I might make comments on the side, but I don't always do that. If I've made a lot of comments on the side in your feedback document, I'll probably just put the grade because I've already talked about it. If I don't do as many comments, I might add a comment there. I'll show you when we go to the file in just a little bit, Ismahan, but you should be able to find, I'm pretty sure I've put in everybody's folder now, a feedback document, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, and anybody else? Anyway, you should go looking for that if you haven't seen it yet. All right, so here's the exciting thing. Your homework for this week, you're gonna be reading a poem called In the Waiting Room and a piece by Jamaica Kincaid called Girl. Girl's not but one page long. And you'll see it's written, did anybody read it already? Let me just say that before I start. It's a very famous piece. Okay, Girl is only one page. You'll see that it's written in an unusual way. And it's regarded as a short story. I've seen it mentioned as one of the most widely translated stories of the past 50 years. But it also reads kind of like a prose poem. You know, it's a really unusual piece. So you're going to be reading both of those. You're going to have study questions on both of them. And that's what you should come prepared to talk about next week, those two pieces. And I'm going to give you just a little bit more about it. The third assignment is to keep up with your journal writing. So here's the Think and Write for Girl. I just wanted to be sure you understood one piece of it. And I want you to think about these 3 bullet points and then just write a well-developed paragraph or more that answers those questions, okay? So here are the questions. Who's speaking in Girl? To whom is the speaker speaking? So just be sure you have that sense. Who's talking, who's listening? And how would you describe the speaker's tone? And do you hear the tone differently at different parts of the story? How so? So let's pause there a second. Tone means what's the tone of voice and what's being said. And, for example, if I was saying, it's time for you to do your homework, you might know that I'm angry, right? If I say, please commit to doing your homework, that's a little bit more conciliatory. If I say, that's a beautiful dress, I'm praising. If I say, that's a beautiful dress, I might be being sarcastic. So that's the kind of things that are in a tone of voice. And so I want you to think about what's the speaker's tone in the essay. And the question, let me just let the cat out of the bag. It does change. Some of the tone is different in different points. So how is it different? Try to look for some of those. And notice I said, support your description of the tone with words or phrases from the story as evidence. If you were going to say that in places it's angry, where would be some examples of that? And you might want to search for adjectives. They may not all be as obvious exactly what the tone is, but that's one piece of that. Any questions about this assignment or about tone? Okay, hold on just a second. I'm going to shift for a minute. Let me put up, okay, let me share this, I'm sorry. Okay, so in your reading folder again, you should find Girl, In the Waiting Room, and the piece we're about to read, The Flowers, okay? And in your homework assignments, you've got a Think and Write for Girl, a Think and Write for the Waiting Room, and some study questions for the flowers that we're going to take up today. I think we're going to be able to finish, but if by chance we don't get all the way through these, there'll be things to answer for homework, okay? But again, you should have your bearings now, but that will be, those will be the, that's where you'll find your work for next week. I was going to take you to a student folder to show you the feedback, but let me just say that if you go to your folder and you don't find, if you go to your essay folder and you don't find something that says essay feedback, or you go to your homework folder and you don't find something that says homework feedback, write me, because I believe I've created them for everyone. For your journal, I've just been writing in the journal from time to time. And I may not have written in everyone's, but I open them to see if you're doing them. I might comment on them. I didn't read any closely this week because I was trying to focus on getting all the homework graded. But I will be looking at those. It's one of the nice things about having you do your journal online is I can check it at any point instead of just taking it up, every 3 or 4 weeks. And so it's just a simpler process. So again, if you don't have a feedback document, you should write me about that, okay? Let's see, maybe I can do this. Let's just, here, Monty, I'm not gonna embarrass you, but let's see, we go to the essays. See, here's her essays, here's her essay feedback. That's what you should find, okay? And if you don't have one of those for essay feedback and homework feedback, then you should let me know. Okay. Ismahan, I hope that answers your question, all right?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so now, okay, so now I want us to take up the flowers. And I think that what would be good, I could read it to you. It's not very long, but I would really rather we read it together, meaning like take turns reading paragraphs. And so what I think I want to do, I'm going to start it off, and then please just volunteer. just be willing. I can also, if nobody says anything, I can cold call. I can just ask people, but I would rather you just volunteer so that we hear a variety of voices. And I know if you haven't read this, but it's a pretty simple story, and the language isn't complicated. I think that you'll be able to read it well enough just starting together. So let me get it up first and then share it. Okay, can everybody see that? Am I sharing it okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so look, so I said it was short. It just goes that long. You may know Alice Walker. She wrote The Color Purple as her most famous work, but she's written a lot of poetry and other novels too. And this is a story called The Flowers, and it features a young girl named Mayab. Okay, so I'll read the first paragraph, and then just one person jump in when I finish, and then when that person finishes a paragraph, somebody jump into the next, so that we can and listen when you're not reading. If you're not reading aloud, follow with your eyes, listen with your ears, and we'll work our way through the story. Okay. The Flowers. It seemed to Mayab, as she skipped lightly from hen house to pig pen to smokehouse, that the days had never been as beautiful as these. The air held a keenness that made her nose twitch. The harvesting of the corn and cotton, peanuts and squash, made each day a golden surprise that caused excited little tremors to run up her jaws.
Mayab carried a short, knobby stick. She struck out at random at the chickens she liked and worked out the beat of a song on the fence around the pigeon. She felt light and good in the warm sun. She was 10, and nothing existed for her but her song. As the stick clutched in her dark brown hand, and the tat-lala of accompaniment. There we go.
Thank you, Tyler.
Turning her back on the rusty boards of her family's sharecropper cabin, Maya walked along the fence till it ran into the stream made by the spring. Around the spring, where the family got drinking water, silver ferns and wildflowers grew. Along the shallow banks, pigs rooted. Maya watched the tiny white bubbles disrupt the thin black scale of soil and the water that silently rose and slid away down the stream.
Thank you.
She had explored the woods behind the house many times.
Sorry, you can go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to go?
No, you can go.
Okay. Often in late autumn, her mother took her to gather nuts among the fallen leaves.
Wait, start again at the beginning, Amani.
Okay.
Thank you.
She had explored the woods behind the house many times. Often in late autumn, her mother took her to gather nuts among the fallen leaves. Today she made her own path, bouncing this way and that way, vaguely keeping an eye out for snakes. She found, in addition to various common but pretty ferns and leaves, an armful of strange blue flowers with velvety ridges and a sweet stud bush full of the brown, fragrant buds.
By 12 o'clock, her arms laden with sprigs of her findings, she was a mile or more from home. She had often been as far before, but the strangeness of the land made it not as pleasant as her usual haunts. It seemed gloomy in the little cove in which she found herself. The air was damp, the silence close and deep.
Thank you, Abdi.
My upbringing. Oh, don't worry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, Maya began to circle back to the house, back to the peacefulness of the morning. It was then stepped smack into his eyes. Her heel became lodged in the wood ridge between brow and nose, and she reached down quickly, unafraid to free herself. It was only when she saw his naked grin that she gave a little yelp of surprise.
Go, Fernanda. Thank you, Christoph.
He had been a tall man, from feet to neck covered a long space. His head lay beside him. When she pushed back the leaves and layers of earth and debris, Myop saw that he had large white teeth, all of them cracked or broken, long fingers, and very big bones. All his clothes had rotted away except some threads of blue denim from his overalls. The buckles of the overall had turned green.
Thank you. One more. please.
Mayap gazed around the spot with interest. Very near where she'd step into the head was a wild pink rose. As she picked it to add to her bundle, she noticed a raised mound, a ring around the rose's root. It was the rotted remains of a noose, a bit of shredding plow line, now blending banely into the soil. Around an overhanging limb of a great spreading oak clung another piece, frayed, rotted, bleached and frazzled, barely there. But spinning restlessly in the breeze, Mayap laid down her flowers, and the summer was over.
Thank you. That was good to read all the way to the end, Kalia. Okay. All right.
No problem.
So our whole story. Let's just, before we start working on our questions, let's just think a minute. Where is this set? Where does the story appear to take place? And what are some clues to that?
A farm.
Okay. And why do you say that, Tyler?
She's talking about chickens.
Yeah, she's talking about chickens. She's talking about harvesting. So it's clear it's some kind of a rural country setting, a farm place. And there are woods nearby, right? Notice it says that turning her back on the rusty boards of her family's sharecropper cabin. What does sharecropper mean? Are y'all familiar with that concept? Well, a sharecropper is someone who worked land that they didn't own, okay? And one of the things, let me ask, one of the things that happened in the South after the Civil War is that many people who had been enslaved became sharecroppers, and they grew crops on land that their previous owners had owned. There could be sharecroppers for other reasons too, but that was one place that it grew out. It usually meant that if you were a sharecropper, you didn't have a great chance of gaining wealth. It was very easy. The sharecropper relied on the person who owned the property for their home, for what they would plant, for what they would sell, for the groceries that they would use during the year. They would have credit. And so, a common thing is that there were many examples where a sharecropper would, say, grow a crop that was worth $300. And the person who owned the land would say, yeah, but you owe me $350 for all the supplies I gave you and for the food we've given you over the winter. So you actually owe me $50 instead of having made anything. So sharecropping was a good way to stay in poverty. And sharecroppers were not necessarily all formerly enslaved people. Many very poor whites were sharecroppers as well too. But that's a little bit about the background. What else do we know about Mayop?
She's very young.
Yeah, how old exactly, Tyler?
10.
She's 10, all right. What's another thing that we know about Mayop?
She's brown,
Yeah.
or a girl of color.
Yeah, her dark brown hand, right? Let me ask you, we've been talking about our own names. Have y'all ever heard the name Mayop?
No.
Yeah, I've yet to be in a class where anybody said they've heard the name before. And I have never heard it. I've only seen it in this story. Does it sound like any particular name to you? What ethnicity might you attach to it?
Sounds like Maya, but with a P.
Say that again, Ismahan.
I said the name sounds like Maya, but we
Oh.
say, what is it, Maya, I think? Or like, also sounds like a mop, I don't know.
Yeah, Maya is a good something that's much more common, but it's an unusual name regardless. But we do know she's 10. We do know she's brown, okay? So I'm going to leave up the story. I had actually put all the questions in slides, but I'd rather you be able to get me to scroll to parts of the story to help you with answers than be looking at the questions. So I can open a question and I can see it, but you won't be able to, and I don't think it changes the square, the sharing. So the first question, just listen for a minute and everybody think, and then I'm going to call on somebody to answer. At the beginning of the story, what kind of day are you expecting Myop to have? What words or phrases make you think that? So what kind of day do we expect her to have, and why do we think that?
Well, the day she's expected to have is she's kind of says it in like the first paragraph where she says it seemed to Maya as she skipped lightly from the house to the pigeon. So that she had never that the day's never been as beautiful as these. So like yeah, so it's,
Yeah,
it's basically gonna be a good day.
As beautiful as these. She's been on a run, right? It sounds like it's been, what time of year do we think it is?
It is summer.
Looks like summer, right? Thank you, Hannah. And it's, these are beautiful days, okay? And each day, what? A golden surprise, all right? So we're expecting her to have a very nice day. And the phrases sort of set that off. When I kind of partially answered my next question. The last line says, and the summer was over. But judging from the opening of the story, what do we think her summer's been like up to this point? How does it look like her summer has been?
It sounds like it was great, and she just enjoyed the outdoors.
Yeah. Abdi, how's she going to entertain herself today? What does she do?
She goes out, she explores the woods behind her house.
She just goes out to explore the woods. And notice, what does it say here? She felt the light brown sun. Where does it say she didn't have a care?
She was 10 and nothing existed for her but her song.
Thank you, Abdi. Yeah, she was 10 and nothing existed for her but her song and just a little, music she made banging her stick along. So she's, this is what childhood should be like, right? That, she's, every day is kind of an adventure. Every day is beautiful, got nice surprises, nothing to worry about. That's basically where we find her at the beginning. So now, hold on, I've lost my questions. Where are they? Just a second. I must have closed. There they go. All right. Next question. While Maya was out walking in the woods and picking flowers, what did she literally step into that was shocking? What did she step into that was shocking?
Dead body.
And was that you, Tyler? I couldn't see the screen.
Yes.
Okay. How did you know it was a dead body?
Well, I knew it was a body because she said words like he and his. So she's talking about something that's alive. And he was wearing overalls, she said. And only people do that. And he was in the ground and there was a noose.
Okay, well, you jumped ahead there, but excuse me, hold on a second. The thought I turned my phone off. The but let's go. But you said the he. I thought you said dead, but then you made it sound like something was alive. Is it live or dead?
It's dead. He's
Yeah.
dead.
Okay. And can we come up with some other phrases that let us know a little bit? Is it a body? What does it seem is actually there? Notice that she stepped smack into his eyes, okay? The broken ridge between the brow and nose. And there was a naked grin. We'll get a few more details. Let's see, he had large white teeth that had cracked or broken and long fingers and very big bones. If she can see his bones, what's likely is the state of this body that she's found.
It's decomposed.
Yeah, Kate, both of you, Kalia and Tyler, it's decomposing. The clothes had rotted away. And so there's just these little vestiges of things. So now, let me come back. So she's found a body, and what details in the story point to murder? Tyler got to that point already. What points to there having been a murder?
His teeth are all broken and like his bones are broken.
Well, it's, but he could have just had a heart attack in the woods, and nobody ever found him. But how do we know that? What's a hint that it's something more serious than that?
They found the broken noose. And since it was on the ground, it doesn't mean he hanged himself. It means somebody hanged him and then dropped the noose.
Okay. Well, and look, there are two things. It was the rotted remains of a noose. Does everybody know what a noose is and what it's used for?
It's a rope that they use, like someone can use to hang themselves, or like someone's being hung, like killed.
Right. And when somebody's, one of the words when people are hung by others, and especially hung illegally without any kind of a trial or with just, as a kind of act of violence, we call that a lynching. And a noose would be what was used there. And, people do hang themselves, but we know that, but the hanging here, it was a rotted remains of a noose. And look, a bit of shredding plow line now bending benignly in the soil. Around an overhanging limb of the great spreading oak tree clung another piece, phrased, rotted, bleached, and frazzled, barely there, but spinning restlessly in the breeze. So what is it that's what's up in the tree? If we were in class, I would draw a picture where there's a tree and there's a skeleton body underneath it. There's a little noose and a round of flower, the remains of a root noose and a little mound there. And up in the tree, what's hanging down a little bit?
Is it the branch? I don't know. Like that's where they would hang them.
Yeah, but notice there's the branch, and then there's around an overhanging limb hung another piece of plow line, okay? Another piece of the rope, and it's just spinning in the breeze. So this isn't one of my questions, but this story's called but here's something we can think about. The story's called The Flowers. And at this moment, Mayop laid down her flowers. Remember, she had been gathering flowers as she went through the woods, but now she lays them down. What do you think she laid her flowers down there?
To pay respects to the dead man.
Out of respect. And what makes you think to the dead man too? What makes you say that, Tyler? I mean, what are you talking about, the way that flowers are associated with the dead when you say that?
Well, usually when you go to a funeral, you bring flowers to lay down at the gravestone to show respect and care for the person who had died.
Yeah, I think that that's a very common kind of convention, right? But I probably didn't ask that question in the right order. When you saw a story named The Flowers, okay, what might you have thought the story would have been? Let's forget we've read this. If you just saw the title, The Flowers, what might you have expected from the story?
Going outside, having fun, playing, looking at flowers in the summer.
Yeah, or perhaps, but fun, something nice. What's another strong association? Tyler said associated flowers with funerals. What else do we associate flowers with?
Beauty.
Beauty. Somebody else, though. Give me something else. What's another reason people exchange flowers?
For love.
For love, right? Right. We associate, we wasn't that long ago, we had Valentine's. It's probably the biggest flower selling day of the year. But so we could have started this story, and especially if she's gathering flowers, we didn't know we were going to end up here. But yes, I think Tyler's on the right track there, that she lays down her flowers, that, it's kind of almost like an intuitive gesture of respect. And let me say, one of the reasons I paused there is a student was the very first one who made me connect this with funerals, with the idea of respecting the dead. I thought that sounded quite true, and that would made as much sense of anything. She was probably kind of rattled here, but she laid down her flowers. But now here's the kicker too. Hold on just a second. Let me look back just to see. What do you think it means? And let's hear from someone we haven't heard from, or as much from, someone we haven't heard from. What does it mean that the summer was over?
All right.
What does it mean that the summer was over? Well, how did you take that?
We took it like it was the end of her joy of the summer, like after she laid down her flowers next to that body. That was it. Like it didn't mean that summer was like it was over and like the weather changed and whatever, but that meant her fun for like her the fun she had for the summer was over at that point.
Yeah, not that the season was over, but summer in the sense of the way it had been so joyful for her, right, Amin? Right?
Yes, sir.
The way that it had
Yes.
been happy and easy for her to enjoy, where every day was an adventure and some kind of beauty. So how would you describe this? How would you describe this moment if the summer was over? What do you think that says, like, about how discovering this body and seeing this news, how is that going to affect her?
It kind of took away her innocence in a sense, or I mean her carefreeness.
Good. And why would it do that, Abdi? What has she learned, in effect, by discovering this?
Well, she was just enjoying the outdoors like she was all summer, and the only thing on her mind was just enjoying life. And then she literally walks into the face of death. So
yeah, and think about it this way too. Not only death, which is when we discover that we die, that is a jolt. That's if you those of you who know the Adam and Eve story deals with the discovery we're mortal, that as though it were a curse from God. But but she not only comes upon the dead person, but how does the lynching figure into her loss of innocence? How does a noose figure into her loss of innocence?
Because she's brown.
She's brown, and so what is she learning from that?
She's learning that horrible things can happen to her.
could happen to her, could happen to others, that there's evil out there, right? Not just that there's death, but there's evil, there's threats. And so I believe it was Abby used a really good word. She lost her innocence. We think of our innocence as being the, or Abby, you tell us a little bit more. What did you mean by innocence? Don't let me explain.
I guess just in the beginning of the story, it makes her seem like you know, a child, like someone that's 10 that just thinks that their life is going to be forever and they're always going to have their parents and they're just always going to be happy.
Yeah.
That's what
And we like to think that, right? And life has a way of teaching us that it's going to go in other directions. But this is more, you know, there is a part of this. I mainly want you to pick up on the noose, the hanging out there. That's has to do with injustice, you know, that has to do, that's not likely. There's no good way. There's a historical thing there that says that this was common and it was cruel, and she's now discovered it. So it's hard for her to be the same anymore. And that brings us, the last thing I wanted us to think about, and it would maybe even be good if everybody wrote about it, but I want you to think about this for a couple of minutes before we talk about it. What do you think, if her summer's over, what do you think the rest of her day was like? You know, what did she do next? What were her next few weeks going to be like?
Bitter and cold and mournful.
Wait, Tyler, not too quickly. I want you to think about it before we get it, because we're not necessarily to think about it in the same way. But how is this going to affect her? What do you imagine she did the rest of the day? Where did she go from here? And how is this likely to affect her in the coming days and weeks? So just think about that a minute and put some words around it. Try to jot down a couple of notes, and then we'll hear from a few of you. But what did she do after this? Where did she go? And what do you picture this experience, how do you picture this experience affecting her in the time ahead? We say her summer's gone. Let's put some flesh around that. Let's try to think about, imagine, the story ends here, but now let's just imagine for ourselves what becomes of her. What does she do next? What's it like in the period ahead? And I'll give you a couple of minutes and then we'll hear from some of you. So I put the question up there so you could think about it as you collect your thoughts.
Should we just write it in our notes or like in our drive?
You can just jot it wherever you can. I'm not necessarily asking to collect it. I just want you to gather your thoughts before we talk.
Okay.
Oh, Christoph, I just saw your note that you say your mic's not working. Okay. I put the question down so I could just look at people to ask about. But let's see. Luther, could you start us off?
Yeah, basically her childhood like came to like a end, like she realized that the world that she lived in was like evil. So like that probably traumatized her as a kid, knowing that every day that, harm might come her way, that someone might try to kill her or something like that.
Okay, traumatize is an important word, and I do think that this is the kind of thing that would traumatize somebody. Luther, did you think of anything more concretely? What do you think she might have done when she next? What do you think she might have done as soon as she left that spot?
hmm I mean, like, she might have not like, gone outside like that anymore. She probably would have like stayed inside and, just try to stay away from like the outside world.
Very good. So you could imagine she's not as likely to find those woods as comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, who had something slightly different from that, or however it was? Misael, could we hear from you?
Sure. I was gonna say that after she went home, I think she would be scared to go out, or maybe scared that someone's gonna go looking for her, maybe.
Okay, so, but you imagined her going home. How many? Let's hear some more others. Just concretely, what do you think she did next?
Can
Adrian,
I go? Oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
Okay. I feel like this is just coming because I have a 9-year-old, so I'm just thinking like what my 9-year-old will do. I feel like because kids are so innocent that they would first start asking a bunch of questions, and then they would like continue as go about their day and just basically internalize it. They wouldn't really go first and like hide out unless they have seen things like that multiple times. It takes like multiple situations for them to actually start thinking and like feeling depressed about stuff like that, like seeing something like that first. I feel like maybe she would have internalize it and just go about her day and still be a child.
Yeah. Well, that's that's an interesting tension, Jay, you talk about. And I think that's one of the main things to think about. Would she internalize it? Would she not say anything? And yet you also said she might start asking a lot of questions, right? Didn't you say both things?
Yeah, I definitely think she would ask a million questions. Yeah.
Which would be more healthy, to ask questions or not?
Well, probably, I don't know what year this was written in, but if it was back in the day, where slavery was going on, and I don't think she would ask those questions. I think she would keep them to herself.
Yeah.
But
yeah, this was probably,
if her parents were very open, then yeah, she would ask the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was probably written, I bet, like in the 70s or 80s. It could be set anytime from Reconstruction up into the 30s and 40s, and maybe even almost today. They're probably close to sharecroppers in some real poor areas, but it could easily have been in the 30s and 40s, or somewhat earlier as far as the setting. It has a little bit of a timeless quality. But again, I think you bring up good points. That's one thing to think about is, would she want to go talk to her mother? Would she have a million questions, or would she just go to her room and close the door? And how would each of those wind up affecting her? And Jay, you said an interesting thing too. This might be the start, but she might need to see it more than one time to really take it in some fashion, right? Isn't that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got just a couple of minutes. Anyone else have something to add? Anything that you saw slightly differently or wondered about?
I think she could maybe internalize it, because if she noticed that her summer was over at the age of 10, and at the beginning of the story, nothing existed to her except her song. So if at that point, if she noticed that the summer was over and that was like a tragic thing to happen and it's a bad thing, and she left her flowers and left, I would I think like she probably won't ask any questions. She would be more in shock, and she would be more disappointed at the reality of life, like
Yeah.
after noticing that.
Yeah, and let me add here, we're all of these different interpretations are possible, right? All we know is that her summer was over. And so, I mean, I think the path you just described there sounds very possible, but there, we don't know. The point is to try to imagine for ourselves, because that's some of what would be involved in confronting the fact that she discovered this horrible thing, that it makes her more aware. The more questions she learns, the more she's going to learn about lynching, the more she's going to learn that it's an evil thing, and that the world's not quite as safe as it was when she started out that morning. So let me stop there. Let me just say, we're right up at the time. The Abdi, somebody gave us loss of innocence. This is definitely a story about loss of innocence. The In the Waiting Room is going to be another one in a very different way about loss of innocence. And so think about that theme. That's going to be one of the things that you might have an option to write about. Girl is a slightly different story, but it has an innocence about it as well, probably too. But it's much, you read it and then we'll talk about it next week. But I hope that this gave you something to think about. And I appreciate your conversation today. Any questions before we go?
I just wanted to ask, is the homework going to be due on Thursday?
Yes. Monty, I didn't think about asking it early because I'm probably going to be busy grading papers. So, if you do get it early, post it early, it may be I'll get a chance to look at some before class, but probably I'll come into class next Thursday without having read or next Friday without having read the homework. I'm mainly going to be focused on getting your personal narratives graded. So Thursday's fine. I'm sorry I didn't put that there. Thank you for reminding me. Okay. All right. Any other questions? AD, why don't you stay just a minute if you could, and why don't we talk while we're both here for a second, all right? Is that okay, AD? Can you stay for another couple of minutes? All right. Thank you all. Let me hear from you if you have questions. Thank you for being here today. I'll see you next Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you, y'all.
Bye, Professor Kenny.
AD, you there?
Sorry, Professor.
Hi, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you talk a couple of minutes before we go away?
Can you give me a minute? Yes, I'm here.
Okay, can you stay for another minute or two to talk?
Yes,
okay.
Of course.
Okay, hold on just a second. Let me, yes, and forgive me, AD, I forgot that I had gotten your Gmail, so I was able to set up your folder, but I'm mainly concerned because I didn't see any homework and I don't see any essays. Have you been doing any of your work as you've gone?
Sorry, professor, I didn't clearly understand this program, and I couldn't find where essays and homeworks.
Okay. Well, you know, I probably sent you a link that gives you access to this area. But if you've done any homework, you need to send it to me in an email and I'll put it in your folders to get you started. But right now, because I don't see anything here, I'm thinking that you haven't done any of your work yet. And so my feedback had simply been, no, nothing's posted. And so I mainly, AD, I'm trying to be sure, are you planning to, have you been doing work?
Yes.
Okay, can you send it to me attached to email?
Okay.
Let's do that, and then I'll regroup with you once I see what you've done. But I mainly, this is like our, let's see, hold on just a second. This is our 5th class meeting, like a third of the way through the semester. And I'm not seeing any work from you, and you can't succeed in the class if I don't see work from you, okay?
It's my 2nd class.
Okay, that's all the more reason, if you missed the first 2 or 3, it's all the more reason you have to start catching up, okay? You don't get to say, I was late joining you. That's fine for an early assignment, but now I need to see you're starting to keep up, okay?
So do you have attempts of essays?
Did you do your personal narrative essay that I assigned last week?
No.
Okay, just please send me whatever you've done, and I will send you a message back telling you exactly what you need to do next. If you, and in AD, here's the thing, you have to start doing things or you're just not going to get any benefit from the class, okay?
Okay.
You know, like starting late is not a reason for not doing the personal narrative. Everybody else got that assignment last Friday. You had the same amount of time to do it that everyone else did.
Got it.
And I'm only speaking, thank you. I'm only speaking that sternly because you need to understand you have to start doing things or it's just not going to work. Okay?
Okay. Okay.
All right. Send me what
Thank
you
you, Professor.
have. Okay? Take care.
Okay.